Well, hello everybody and welcome. This is Lizzie and Justin, and we are from Thirdspace, and we are here for another week of our Turning Towards Life conversation, and you are so welcome to be with us. So this conversation is coming to you right on the brink of the beginning of a new calendar year. It's the 31st of December 2023. So here we are on one of these transitions, but maybe you'll be listening to this in some other time and some other place, who knows when. And you're very welcome to be with us whenever that is. And Lizzie, I'm very glad for us to be together. And one of the things I thought to say this morning was that in the world of Thirdspace, which you're also welcome to go and have a look at, check out wearethirdSpace.org. We are beginning to gear up towards the next year of our year-long professional coach program, the PCC, which I'm getting very excited about. People are flocking around this, which starts in the summer. So it's probably worth mentioning at the end of December that in the summer, this very wonderful project and opportunity is coming into the world again for another year. And to encourage you to take a look at it if you would so like. And I think the only other thing to say is, Lizzie, thank you for being here again so faithfully for another week, and for bringing a wonderful source for us to talk about. And Lizzie, you are currently muted, so we can't hear a word you're saying.
Sorry, I was coughing and didn't want to expose everybody to my coughage. I was just saying I feel like I'm completely feel very oblivious to time at the moment. So thank you for reminding me, Justin, that it's going to be a new year. I feel like my life has been very welcomely turned upside down by having a newborn, and time references seem very strange and irrelevant to me at the moment. With very little rhythm in our lives, I can't really gauge things. So anyway, I'm feeling newly surprised by the fact that it's New Year and really grateful. And when I chose this source, Justin, I wasn't thinking that it was a new year, but as I'm wondering about it again, how excellent to kind of enter into the new year with this wonderful source by Anne-Marie Lindbergh, which seems such a big invitation to me. So I'm going to read as we normally do, Justin, and then we'll hear from you and we'll see how this conversation unfolds. So here we go. This is a passage by Anne-Marie Lindbergh, and it's actually from this little book. I'm holding up a book if you're listening on audio. It's called Gift from the Sea by Anne-Marie Lindbergh. It's a kind of a smallish book that's a kind of flick open wherever you like number, which I really like because I often have about 40 seconds to do something like that. Rather than sit for hours on the sofa reading or something. So anyway, I'm grateful to Anne for having written this and for us being in this wondering together, responding to her invitation. So here we go, Justin. When you love someone, you do not love them all the time in exactly the same way from moment to moment. It's an impossibility. It's even a lie to pretend to. And yet, this is exactly what most of us demand. We have so little faith in the ebb and flow of life, of love, of relationships. We leap at the flow of the tide and resist in terror its ebb. We're afraid it will never return. We insist on permanency, on duration, on continuity, when the only continuity possible in life, as in love, is in growth, in fluidity and freedom, in the sense that the dancers are free, barely touching as they pass, but partners in the same pattern. The only real security is not in owning or possessing, not in demanding or expecting, not in hoping even. Security in a relationship lies neither in looking back to what was in nostalgia, nor forward to what it might be in dread or anticipation, but living in the present relationship and accepting it as it is now. Relationships must be like islands. One must accept them for what they are here and now within their limits. Islands surrounded and interrupted by the sea and continually visited and abandoned by the tides.
Thanks, Lizzie. So just as you said, this is by Anne-Marie Lindbergh, and you can find it on our Turning Towards Life website, on YouTube, in the notes for the podcasts, and in our Facebook group, which you're so welcome to join if you haven't joined it yet. Just search us out and make a request to join, and we'll be very glad to have you with us. When you love someone, you do not love them all the time in exactly the same way from moment to moment. It is an impossibility. It is even a lie to pretend to. And yet this is exactly what most of us demand. We have so little faith in the ebb and flow of life, of love, of relationships. We leap at the flow of the tide and resist in terror its ebb. We are afraid it will never return. We insist on permanency, on duration, on continuity, when the only continuity possible in life, as in love, is in growth, in fluidity, in freedom, in the sense that the dancers are free, barely touching as they pass, but partners in the same pattern. The only real security is not in owning or possessing, not in demanding or expecting, not in hoping even. Security in a relationship lies neither in looking back to what was in nostalgia, nor forwards to what it might be in dread or anticipation, but living in the present relationship and accepting it as it is now. Relationships must be like islands. One must accept them for what they are, here and now, within their limits. Islands, surrounded and interrupted by the sea, and continually visited and abandoned by the tides.
Thanks, Justin. As you were reading, I got this very kind of flowy sense of freshness coming over me, like a kind of big pressure had been taken off. And maybe that's how come I thought this source would be wonderful to talk about together, because it seems to me that in the receiving of this, in the listening, in the letting it seep into me, this writing by Anne Morrow Lindbergh, I feel a kind of permission to feel the aliveness of being in relationship with someone, rather than all of the kind of the requirements I have of it and the graspiness I have around it, all my relationships when I think about it. And the thought of me being a dancer and being free and being close with one another, but being in my own dance, yes, sharing a pattern, but not being the same, not being attached to each other or something, not being plastered onto one another, but of course flowing in similar patterns, somehow allows me to feel a kind of freshness. And I'm really appreciating that. Like, as I'm sitting here with you and wondering about the people closest to me and the people farthest away and all the in-betweenness, some kind of allowing seems to be here in receiving these words, so that I don't have to, I don't have to grab and grasp, which I think is a kind of panic mode for me of like, I've got to make the most of something, or this has got to be perfect, or this has got to be right, or this has got to be what I need, or something. It's a very different kind of way of moving in relationships, to feel like this is a reality and to welcome it.
This idea of having the dance itself be the way that we look at this, rather than how close we are at any point in the dance. And I was thinking, as you were reading, talking about it, Lizzie, how grateful I am, I think, to have found my way much more towards this in my life than I used to. Oh my goodness, the pain and the desperation and the longing and the overthinking and the trying to get things to go a particular way that I have had in so many relationships, friendships, and love relationships, and family, and colleagues, and everywhere. Like, you have to be in right here with me. It has been one way, a sort of demanding a certain kind of intensity and intimacy, but also um, finding myself not able to trust it. So I really love what Amarillo says, which is that we love the flow and we resist its ebb. And for me, for such a long time, interpreting any move away as disaster, and then wanting to grab and pull someone back in, or have them tell me that they weren't going, or all of
Mm.
those kind of things. And what I can feel in it in my own body as I talk about it is how much of that in me, and I'm sure this is true of many people. So for me, a huge amount of that desperation has come from a really, really, really strong kind of, I suppose, if I say it in a very strong way, sort of self-loathing or self-doubt, which is I can only find out that I'm okay if you love me, and you love me in a very particular way. And if you move away, I'm going to find out that I'm not okay, and that's going to prove it. And so it also, at its most sticky and most difficult, was never really about the other person anyway. It was much more to do with what I get shown about me and the relief that I get from my own self-criticism and all of that kind of thing. So anytime anyone would move, it'd be like, now I'm being exposed to how I really feel about myself. So don't you dare go, or I'm terrified of you going. So I think that for me anyway, there's been a very strong correlation, connection between finding out how to be much, much, much kinder and more gentle and more welcoming of myself has come in parallel with this movement that Anne-Marie Limburg is inviting us into. And the truth is, it's much kinder to, or I find is, it's much kinder and more loving to other people, to the people I love, to have them move far and come in close when it is right for them or right for the tides, than it is to try and fight the tide, which is filled with pain and desperation and anguish and all of those kind of things. But also the other sort of, it seems really obvious to say it in a way, which is that relationships go much better that way too. So it's a really, the being in the sticky, graspy, this relationship is only good if you're coming in closer and closer and closer and closer and more and more and more and more. Is such an unreasonable and constricting demand to place on another person and on myself, that it's like, I feel like it's sort of like trying to climb up the inside of an increasingly tightening funnel or something, like squishing in, squishing, squishing in. And it's horrible, actually. So Anne's language, that we that the real security, that the security in our relationships isn't where we often think it is incredibly powerful and incredibly liberating. That the security is in the dance, and that you might, Lizzie, be way off over the other end of the room, or even out the door at some point. But that's not where I'm looking. That's not the place to look to
Mm.
find out where the ground is. So as I've learnt more of this, I can think right now of people who I love dearly, 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 who are really a long way, unreachable.
Mm.
I can think of someone else who I love really dearly who's reappeared just in the last few weeks after a long, 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 long absence. And yes, there's pain and sorrow in being far from someone that I love. Um, but also a kind of very sweet joy I'm discovering in knowing that I can love someone however they are and whatever they're up to. There's a great
Mm.
freedom in it. And I suppose the great freedom is really the freedom is to actually be the ones that we are. Not, I don't have to bend myself out of shape in order to love someone, and they don't have to bend themselves out of shape in order to love me. We can be like, just reading what she says here. We can be like islands, visited and abandoned by the tides.
Mm. Gosh, Justin, it's really, what's the word? I feel thrown into an inquiry with what you said about when someone moves far away or there's some ebb, to use Anne's language, in the relationship, that what it does is it exposes how what's already going on here rather than anything else, actually. And I'm finding myself so curious about that, that for lots of us, what's happening in a relationship, it's so exposing of what we're already doing to ourselves on some level that we can't see unless it's shown to us by whatever's happening in our relationships. And so the thought that I could somehow bring the inquiry back to myself rather than throwing it the attack or response or reaction out to the other person of, how dare you move away from me, and carry on in that way of being demanding and being hurt and all those things. If I could say to myself, well, what's happening with me that's already here, that I have this demand in the first place for things to be a certain way? How am I treating myself? What do I think of myself? How am I, what's lacking here that's having me be this particular set of demands and requests and all those things in a relationship? What a different course an argument will take. Like, it's just a completely different way of relating. To include myself and what's happening here is so different than making it about what the other person is doing, and instead using or allowing what the other person is doing in their dynamic of their tide ebbing and flowing, instead of that being a chance for me to be cross with them. It could be an invitation for me to wonder about myself and to see what's happening here that has me be reacting this way, and how gentle or ungentle I'm being with myself, or how kind or unkind, or how accepting or unaccepting I'm being with myself, and also how intimate I am with my being, with my Lizziness, with my life force. I think that's the thing that's so moving to me about the dancing metaphor is, if you watch a couple dancing and they're really, really excellent dancers, each of them has to have their own ground and their own center and their own connection to the earth and the floor and the core of them in order to be able to participate in a way that's necessary. Otherwise, one person's holding it all up and the other person is relying on them, or some dynamic happens, and then the dance can't be the dance that's intended by them having joined. So I'm feeling very, like I'm often doing these conversations, thrown into a wondering, thrown into a, oh my gosh, could we please spend 3 days talking about all of the different repercussions of being in our own space or center or ground and confidence and shiningness? What impact does that have on the nature of the way our relationships go and what happens in our lives? And what happens when someone criticizes us? What happens when someone decides that they just want to move away a little? Or what happens when somebody wants to come in really close? that's what been one of the tricky things in my life is feeling like I want to run when someone comes in really close. And I guess that's another side of a similar coin of if you move away, I feel terribly rejected. But if you come close, I feel like I want to run. It's like already I feel completely confused by what I'm saying and completely compelled to wonder about it and to ask many, many questions about it.
Mm.
Feels really very fertile ground for the whole of life or something.
Mm. Lizzie, I've just switched microphones because I realized I was set up wrong up until now. So I'm just checking you can still hear me okay.
I can hear you, yeah.
Good. Well, there's certainly 3 days or more to spend talking about this. There's no doubt about that. I'm really thinking about what you said about dancing. So I've never found dancing myself the easiest thing, and I think mostly because of a very similar kind of dynamic in me that's affected relationships in the way that I was talking about, which is feeling very self-conscious in the midst of it. And like, it's a little bit like what we were talking about in last week's Turning Towards Life, feeling like everyone's eyes are turning towards me in some way. And it's been a lot of taking a lot of letting go to free myself up in that. And I can feel the same thing when I watch people I know who dance and who can dance well. Like you're saying, there's both. I can see that what we have to find is we have to find ground and ease in ourselves that really has nothing to do with anyone else first or as part of it. And at the same time, what we need to find is responsiveness to the other. So if you're completely dependent upon the other, there's nothing of you in it. You end up being thrown around by the movements of the other, and there's no grace in it. But also, if you're only occupied with yourself and how wonderful your moves are, there's no relationship with the other person. So you have to have both poles of that. And I think also then a lot of the stories we've been told about friendships and relationships of different kinds, and including friends, romantic relationships, family, all of that, we've inherited many of our stories that in a way it's a sort of consumer relationship, which is
Mm.
which really is along the lines of the I'll be completed by you. I'm thinking about the story we get about romantic relationships, which is another person will complete me. So if I take up that story that another person completes me, then essentially what I'm saying is I'm not sufficient. I'm dependent upon you to be a very, very particular way in order to complete whatever it is that I feel like I've not got. And the moment you're not that, the moment you don't fit my shape, or the moment you're not at exactly the right kind of distance for me, whether that's too far or, as you were saying, Lizzie, sometimes too close, um, it's a cause for all kinds of things: judgments, panic, self-doubt, self-loathing, desperation, all of these kind of things. And in treating the weird paradox about it is that by not taking care of by not finding out myself in the relationship, I by not treating myself as a full person in the relationship, I end up not treating you as a full person in the relationship. And I know I've done that many times in my life. Usually for me, it's the moving too far bit. Um, Someone who I've wanted to be in very close has taken half a step backwards, and suddenly I'm grasping and grabbing and demanding, maybe very explicitly, or maybe in all kinds of weird, distorted, unarticulated ways that the other person can feel. And all of a sudden we're in relational weirdness. And most of it has come in me from the this part of not finding my own ground, my
Mm.
own place in it. And the thing that struck me when you were talking was it could sound like finding ourselves would then make our relationships a very selfish place. Well, I'm going to find myself and then somehow it's all about me. But actually, seems to be on the contrary. When I find myself, I can also start to be honest about what I actually need and what I actually long for. And if you take a half a step away, instead of being quietly desperate and trying to manipulate you back into the right direction, I can also say to you, it's painful and tender for me that you're half a step away, which isn't the same as, and it might be, please will you come closer because I would love that. But it might even framing it as a request offers the possibility that you might stay half a step or 10 steps away. Or if I know myself well enough, it allows me to go, it is painful for you to be 10 steps away. That's something I know about myself. But then to really commit to what Anne is inviting us into is to saying the flow and the ebb and the flow both are valuable. So the not being aware of my own longings, my own patterns robs me of the possibility of doing what she's saying, which is trusting even when the relationship isn't exactly the way I would long it to be. I see. I don't think she's saying to us, just be fine with every move that happens. I might experience all kinds of things. And can I know myself well enough and be kind for myself to feel sad that somebody I care about is now absent for a while and still be faithful to the bigger holding pattern?
I was just thinking, Justin, so you were talking about the capacity that we can cultivate for observing ourselves, and the place where your observation of your dynamic comes from, where you can say, well, I know that actually when you move away from me, what gets exposed is what's going on with me. The quality of self-observation that's necessary for that to be something that you could see in yourself is very different than just being a set of reactivity to what's going on in the world and your life and your relationships, but actually stopping and reflecting and wondering what's happening with me, how am I feeling, what am I hurting about, really. Asking ourselves some really good questions about what's really going on, which of course means we have to let go of, in some way, our reactivity, like let go of the story that we're telling about what's happening, which feeds our reactivity, and inquire in quite a different way that allows us to see what's happening inside, in our system, in our feeling system, in our bodies, in our thinking, in the storytelling, in the meaning making that we're doing. If we can develop the capacity to reflect like that, this whole new world opens up of the kind of conversation that we're having here. And there's such agency in that. I can feel my own system going, oh, okay, so I don't have to be like dragged around by the hair backwards through this. I can stand upright and wonder what's going on here. And of course, we say this all the time, Justin, and it's just always true that 1,000 times a day I will be failing at this, and being dragged around and reacting and being upset and cross and hurt and all the things. But I also really believe in the spaces and the relationships that I have that are able to help me find my dance partnerness, my uprightness, so that, and my own ground, so that when someone is up to something, I can, even in my most reactive moments, I think I can see what's happening, even if it's partial. I'm also watching it. And I think that's one thing I feel so grateful for. You mentioned our year-long program at the beginning of this chat that we're having, Justin. And I think that's one of my deep gratitudes for that, is that it's a whole system of how to do that, how to wonder what's happening here, how to get very curious about what this particular embodiment of life is all about, and what's in the background and what's in the foreground, and where's my reactivity and where's my capacity to respond to what's here that's filled with, knowing what that's filled with, being really honest with myself about what that is. And then the gift that that gives me to have some power in determining my experience of my life and the choices that I make and the people that I hang out with and the way that I live, so that even when I'm in the right old mess, I know there in there somewhere is a way through, which, as you were saying, is often to do with being able to talk about things and to be in relationship about the most tender places in me. That, the example I gave of people coming too close and me feeling like I need to run. It's like being in the kinds of relationships where I can say, I want to run right now. I'm going to carry on talking to you, but all of my body wants to leap out the door and put everything down and run as fast as my legs will carry me to goodness knows where. Can we talk about that? And can you help me be with what it feels like to want to run? And I have that not only with intimacy with other people, but intimacy with myself. Like I know every time I sit down to just wonder what this is like to be me and to ask some questions and to reflect on something just like this that we're talking about today, my first reaction is I want to leg it. I want to just get out of here. I don't want to face into those parts of me that feel wounded or hurt or can understand the reason I want to run or the reason I want to hide or the reason I want to collapse or the reason I want to fight or whatever the reaction is. It's a really hard thing to do. And so to be in conversation with it with another person feels like such a big gift, because otherwise all that happens is the same thing again and again. I want to run, I want to run, I run, I come back, I run again. And so I think that's one of my big gratitudes in my life is to our program, where we're up to that all the time. We're wondering what's really going on underneath the bonnet, and we're asking big questions of one another, and we're cultivating the kinds of relationships and the kind of safety and trust between us that allows us to be in those questions and wriggle into some answers that are really life-giving and shift all kinds of things for us, but also for the people around us and the things we get up to and the projects we're in and the lives that we lead and the whole thing.
Very tiny response because I know we're probably near the end of our time. So yes, to all the things that our program is about, and any way that anyone gets supported in looking at all of this is such a gift. The thought I was having, Lizzie, was if I take our friendship, if I'm a person who, when we judge what a relationship is by looking in the wrong place. So if I'm a person who looks in the how close am I to this person and I'm assessing the relationship all on that, and I don't know that that's what I'm doing. Can I get closer? Can I get closer? And you're a person who's going, I want to run, I want to run, I want to run.
Yeah.
We're doomed, right? Because all the ways that we're assessing how this relationship is going are actually based upon our own unexamined preferences. If you can say it's really important to me to have distance when the time is right, and I can say it's really important to me to feel close, and we can understand that that's going on, we can then interpret one another and ourselves much more accurately, and I can free you up to go and stand, to go and be dancing at the far end of the room, and me to go, this is fine, this is what the relationship is. But until I know that that's me and you know that that's you, and then until we talk about it, in other words, bring our insides onto the outsides, we are going to be in terrible, terrible trouble. Mostly because we're looking in the wrong places. We're looking at what's happening inside us to assess something that's happening between us using the wrong kind of assessment. That's why this language is so wonderful about trusting the ebb and the flow. I'm really appreciating what happens when we learn to observe and watch ourselves well enough, that we can bring ourselves into the in between
Mm.
in ways that we can't do when we're not as long as that's hidden from ourselves. It's very hard to make it available in the in between, and it's in the in between that all relationships, all love, all relationships happen. They happen on the in between. They don't just happen. It might feel like it just happens inside me, but it really is happening on the in between of us.
Gosh, I love that image that's just got planted, Justin, of you wanting to get closer and me wanting to run. This is never going to work. And of course, yeah, goodness knows there's so many thousands of dynamics in relationship. And I feel very, very grateful to be in this conversation and to be thrown into my Sunday with wondering about all of this. So brilliant. So thank you. And thank you to Anne-Marie Limbo for this wonderful articulation of the thing that has brought us into this inquiry. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Justin, for being here. And yeah, for being one of those people that we could have a conversation about the closeness and the farness and the what's happening. I'm really grateful for that.
Mm.
So we'll be back next Sunday when it will be 2024 already. How on earth has that happened? It's amazing. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for being in our community and telling us. Remember, you can email us anytime, hello@turningtowards.life, if you want to share anything with us or say anything to us. Please do. We love that. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.